Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living Manna. Hi, guys. I'm Pastor Dave Sane, Senior Shepherd here at Living Manna. It's Wednesday night. You guys know what that means. Bible study time for us. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. If you're just joining in, please give us a shout out. Let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget, as we normally do, if this is the first time that you're hanging out with us, please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed, or hit the like button. We'd appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm. Hopefully send us out to some more people that are like-minded and want to hear these type of studies. At any rate, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I hope you guys got your Bibles, got some markers, some highlighters, pens, paper. The notes, of course, are available. You can get them on the YouTube or obviously on the app, either one. Go to the description box there in YouTube and you can download the notes or just go right to the app. That is the LMC app, and it should be available there as well. This way you can follow along. And, of course, as usual, it's just going to be up on the screen as well, sort of a split screen, so you guys can read along with me. We've got some interesting stuff for tonight. Before we get into that, let me just go over just some of the stuff coming up. Regular schedule, just like we've been doing. We are absolutely planning to do our Hidden Manna this upcoming weekend. That's on Friday night. With Brother Max, got a neat conversation for you about being a Hebrew. What does it mean to be a Hebrew? Are we Hebrews? Going to talk about that. And, of course, our weekend message is coming up as well on Saturday at 10:45. And the normal stuff each morning is our morning manna. If you haven't been part or downloaded the app, download the app so that you can check us out every morning, early in the morning, usually around 7 o'clock or so. The morning manna will be up. It's just a little 5-minute devotion that you can listen to as you start your day. Drink a cup of coffee, drink a cup of tea, or whatever it is you drink in the morning, and get your day started right. Just with a little encouraging word from Abba, and just a way to start off the day getting that manna. I think those are all the commercials for right now. Thank you again so much, everybody, for hanging out with me tonight. Got a neat one for you. We're just continuing along in the same sort of vein and concept that we've been talking about. We're getting to, bit by bit, piece by piece, we're getting closer and closer to the calendar. Especially today, we're going to start to build up some of the backstory for the calendar. Eventually, I don't have an exact date for it, but in a few weeks, 3, maybe 4 weeks from now, we're going to do a sort of a seminar, I guess, at right after our morning service. So we're going to maybe make an abbreviated morning service. We'll have some lunch, some fellowship after. And anybody that's interested in really talking about the calendar, want to learn more about it, understand where my thinking is on it and the stuff that I've understood, we'll do it probably downstairs in the fellowship area right after. We'll have a lunch. We'll sit down, bring your Bibles. We'll do, I guess, what's called an old-fashioned midrash. We'll go through it and see what we can find out and really sort of come to a conclusion on what the calendar is all about. So I don't have an exact date for you. 3 or 4 weeks, we'll let you know for sure. I just want to put it in your mind so it's there. You can start thinking about it. Do your own research. Go through your own research. Find out what you can. And then we're going to get together. We're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss it and really come to a place where we're all in agreement as to what is what and what it is that we should be doing. But before we get there, studies like tonight are sort of the build-up for it. I want to sort of give the background, because it's one thing just to tell people this is what it says. This is the answer. For me, I need the background. I need to know the story. I need to know why it is the answer. And so today, and not just today, but some of the studies we've been doing are sort of the answer to that question. What's the backstory to this? Why are things the way they are? Why is the calendar so messed up? Why are we in the predicament that we are in? And, of course, all the messages that we've been doing, whether it's on Saturday, whether it's on Friday, whether it's on Wednesday, have all sort of been geared towards this, building us up to this idea of what the kingdom of Elohim really is about, as opposed to sort of what we have heard traditionally for a long time about the kingdom, this sort of rosy, everything's coming up sunshine, everything's coming up beautiful, sort of everything's perfect in the kingdom. We're going to find out, or we've been finding out for a while, it's not. It's not. This kingdom is very, very flawed. Why? Because we are flawed people, and we live in a world that is enveloped by sin. And the enemy is doing everything that it can to destroy this message, which, in fact, leads us to the title for today. And let me pop this up so you guys can see it. Sorry, I went a little bit too far. Let me put this up here so you guys can see it side by side. The title for tonight is The Dragon's Plan. The Dragon's Plan. All right. So I know, kind of interesting little clickbait there, but you're going to see we're going to talk about the dragon's plan, about what's his thinking in all of this. It's pretty consistent, and it's very evident as we begin to open up the scriptures as to what the dragon's plan actually is. It's just that a lot of us don't realize we're right in the middle of it. As well as Abba doing his thing. Abba's plan is working out, right? Abba's will is working out. But the serpent has deceived the whole world. And he's done a really, really good job of it. And so we're going to try to understand a little bit better what that actually means. So let's jump into this. Let's get started tonight. Let's open up with a word of prayer. Abba, we love you. Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts that are willing to obey. In the Master's name, amen. Amen. All right. Again, good evening, everybody. For those people that are joining us, thank you so much again. Here we go. Let's jump into this. The dragon's plan. Let me make this a little bit bigger here for you guys so we can all see. Now, basically, just as an overall statement, what is the dragon's plan? To murder, to deceive, and to lie. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in that order, but generally speaking, the enemy's plan. When we say the dragon, of course, we can say the dragon, we could say the serpent, we can say the devil, we can say Satan. All of those words are all synonymous with each other. But basically, his plan is to murder, to deceive, and to lie. Now, these are just a couple of verses we've talked about before, so a little bit of review for everybody, but they're just, it's a good refresher to put in your mind. This is information the Master has told us and is evident in the scripture from the beginning of the book all the way to the end of the book. It remains consistent. Here, of course, is John chapter 8. And let me just make this a little bigger for me. John chapter 8. And this is, I don't even know what verse this is. I didn't put the verse down there, but I guess it's around verse 40 or so. You guys can check it out. It says, "You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you wish to do." Okay, some familiar verses. We've gone over this quite a few times. Here it is. Here is the description of the devil and what the things that he does. He was a murderer. Okay, so what's part of the plan of the devil? To murder, to kill. Now, it's really, I guess, more accurate to say murder because one can kill accidentally, unintentionally kill, but murder implies intent, right? And the commandment is, thou shalt not murder. And so the enemy here, it says that he, the devil, was a murderer from the beginning and has not stood in the truth. And by truth, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, truth means that which Father has spoken. His word, his instruction is truth. He has not stood in the truth because there is no truth in him. Well, if there's no truth in him, what is in him? Deception. So we've got murder, as the Master says here, and I'm putting the PDP version there in yellow. If there's no truth in you, then there is deception in you. When he speaks the lie, there it is, all three of them, murder, no truth or deception, the lie. He speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. So, just, whole content of the message today. What is the overall plan of the serpent or the plan of the dragon? To murder, to deceive, and to lie. We've got to really take that to heart. I know sometimes we read things like this and we're thinking, oh, that's, he has no real power over us. Oh, yes, he does. Yes, he does. He has real power over everything there is. He is, as the scripture tells us, the God of this age, the Elohim of this age. So he does have great power and great authority. He's actually done a really bang-up job in murdering, deceiving, and lying, as we'll see in just a few minutes. And this is consistent with Genesis 1:1, the whole story of the woman. Again, go back to some of the previous studies. We developed this more deeply. I'm just sort of skirting through it just as an introduction for today. But Genesis 1:1, this is the temptation at the garden, at the tree. It says, the Nachash, the fiery serpent, was more crafty than all the lives, all the souls, all the living beings of the field which Yah Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, is it true? I.e., deception. Because he knows what Abba said. The woman has told him what Abba has said. And he is using deception here by saying, is it true? He's putting a question mark on it. Is what Abba said actually true? Is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And I'm skipping some verses here because we've gone over this story before, but I'm skipping down to verse 3. Finally, it says, Elohim has said, do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. That was the instruction. Don't eat of it. Don't partake of it, or you will die. And the Nachash said to the woman, you shall certainly not die. Well, that's a lie, but more than just a lie, it is murder. Because when she listens to him, when she does what it is that he has asked her to do, she will die. She dies, and of course her husband dies. The plants around them die, and of course ultimately they die. And as a result of it, we all die. Entropy enters into the world. You shall certainly not die. There's murder. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open. Well, there's another lie. So really, we've got deception. Is it true? We've got, you're not going to die. Yes, you are going to die. Murder. And Elohim knows that the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be open. That's a lie. And you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Guys, that's a lie. Doing this, following his instruction, does not make us like Elohim, does not help us to understand the difference between good and evil. As a matter of fact, it does exactly the opposite, to the point where eventually Abba is going to need to give us detailed instruction of what is good and what is evil for us to follow. And the whole trick of the story is going to be, do we follow what Elohim has said or do we not? So right in the beginning, same thing the master said. He's a murderer. There is no truth in him. He is deception. And when he speaks the lie. So ultimately, what is the lie? The lie is when you do not believe what Elohim has said. When you take away from it, when you add to it, when you remove it, when you rebel against it, that is the lie. And the lie contains deception. And ultimately, the lie kills. It brings murder to all of us. This remains consistent all the way to the end of the book. Here's Revelation chapter 12 and verse 7. Again, whole story with the woman, just a little bit of review. So just, you can go back to last week's and get some more information on this. Verse 17 says, and the dragon was enraged with the woman. That's Israel, the Jews who were scattered. And he went to fight with the remnant of her seed, those guarding the commandments of Elohim, that is, guarding his word, the things that Abba has said, like in the garden, Abba said, and possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. So how is the serpent going to come against the remnant of the woman's seed, those children that have come from the woman? He's going to come against them using murder, using deception, and using lies, just like he always has. Nothing changes. So the real key here is to understand what is truth. The truth, of course, is what Father has said. And when we get to the point of questioning, of watering down, of removing, of saying, well, maybe that's not really true for us today. Maybe he didn't mean that. Then we are being lied to, we are being deceived, and ultimately we will be killed by those words. We will see death because of those words. Okay, so just a little bit of review. You guys know this stuff. So basically, and what we've been talking about, not just here on Wednesday, but connecting everything with what we're doing on Saturday, is that the picture of the story that is told to us from Genesis to Revelation, that is told to us from the Master about the kingdom, is not the rosy, everything's wonderful, wealth, health, happiness message that the majority of the religious world portrays as the gospel. Now, Is the gospel good news? Of course the gospel's good news. Of course there is some wonderful and exciting elements and things inside of it. But what the master does in explaining the mysteries of the gospel to us, or the mysteries of the kingdom, is he warns us about all the bad stuff, all the deception, all the lies, all the murdering that we are going to have to work through, endure, live amongst, and overcome. So it's not this rosy, everything's great, I'm saved, and, now everything's just going to come up roses for me. That's just not the story. In fact, it's actually the opposite. Now, these are the parables of Matthew 13. And obviously, we're talking about these on Saturday, and we're only into the second one. It's been a couple of weeks. We're only into the second one. I'm just going to zip through them real quick to paint a picture for you, because these are the mysteries of the kingdom. These are things people just didn't get. They didn't understand. We don't get. We don't understand. And you'll see that the basic theme of these messages is not everything's great. It's not once saved, always saved. It's not, wealth, health, prosperity, healing, all the rest of that. That's not what the kingdom is. The kingdom is the sower and the seed. And it's a story about the seed, Abba's word, that most people don't get. And a lot of people who do get it burn out after a while because they do not have root. Others, the cares of life, burn it away, kill it. The birds of the air, the devil himself comes and steals the seed. But of all the seed that's sown, some of it, I'm going to say the few, the many fall on bad ground, but the few fall on good ground, and it bears fruit. We'll get more into what fruit is and the definitions of all of that this upcoming weekend. But the main theme of the parable is most don't make it. Most who will hear the word of Elohim for whatever reason, multiple reasons, even more than what the master is giving us, just aren't going to make it. That's not a rosy picture. That's a warning. The story of the wheat and the tares. It's a story about weeds. It's a story about wheat, obviously, but it's a story about weeds. Weeds take over the field. An enemy plants weeds. And the weeds look just like the wheat. And the wheat has to grow in the same field with the weeds. Even though weeds choke out the plants, they grow in the same field until harvest, until the time of harvest. And it's only then that they are separated. Well, that's not a rosy, everything's good sort of message. That's a warning to us. That's an absolute warning that the kingdom is full of weeds. They're everywhere, or tares. The 3 measures of meal. This one we did talk about. The 3 measures of meal is that a woman puts leaven, sin. She mixes it into the dough, into the bread, into the word of Elohim, the stuff the priests are supposed to eat. That's supposed to be unleavened. That's not a good story. That's a bad story. That's a warning as to what the kingdom's going to be like. So not everybody makes it. There's weeds all over the place, and the very word of Elohim will be leavened. It will be leavened, and it will the whole lump, all that are touched by it, are going to be affected by this. Then there's the parable of the mustard seed. The birds, same birds, we'll talk more about this when we get there, but the birds of the air nest in this tree that starts off as a little seed. The birds of the air in the first parable is the devil. Wait a minute. Who's resting in the limbs of the tree called the kingdom of Elohim, the stuff that's here on this earth right now? The birds are. The devil is. His seed is in charge of it. I know that's crazy, but that's not a good story. That's not a pie in the sky story. That's a very sobering story meant to warn us as to the realities of what's going on. Next is the treasure. A treasure that's hidden in the field. You got to look for it. You got to find it. And when the one does find it, it will cost you everything to get that treasure. That's the kingdom. This is not easy. This is not just, name it and claim it. This is not word of faith stuff that we hear all the time. This is going to take effort, lots and lots of effort. the pearl of great price. A pearl, that which grows out of this element that is unclean, becomes a precious pearl. And it's only one pearl amongst many pearls that is a pearl of great price. Again, similar story. It's not everybody. It's not everything. It's not the many. It's the few. And then, of course, the dragnet, the fishing net gets cast out, and it catches all sorts of fish, all sorts of different names and types and species of fish. But not all names, types, and species of fish is what Abba wants. So the unclean fish are tossed out of the net, and only the clean fish, that which is actually food, are kept. Again, all of these parables are giving us a warning about the kingdom, and it does not sound like a rosy, everything's great pie in the sky story. It's a very sobering, a very eye-opening, something that we really need to take to heart and listen to these warnings and have eyes to see and ears to hear. The Master's telling us this is not going to be easy. And of course, this isn't the only place, and we'll get more into this as we go through each this upcoming Saturday and some of the weeks coming up. We're going to get more into each one of those parables and really, really define them even more so than just the quick, easy thing I gave you tonight. But that's the basic idea. This is not the story that we normally hear. This is not the message that we normally hear. Anyway, here we go. Oh, sorry, went a little bit too far. Here is Matthew chapter 7, just a couple of verses, just to sort of bring home this point that it's not the many, it's not everybody. As a matter of fact, it's a small number relative to how many people there will actually be that will hear the message. That's what all those parables were telling us. It's not everybody. So here it is, Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. I know we talked about this, so very, very familiar. It says, "Enter through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide, and the way is broad, easy, that leads to destruction. And there are many who enter through it." But here's the warning. "Because the gate is narrow, and the way is hard," just like all the parables we just read, or just, summarized real quick in Matthew 13. The way is hard. It's hard pressed that leads to life eternal. And there are few who find it. Take that to heart and think about let that percolate inside of you for a second. If there's only a few who find it, do you want to be part of the many, or do you want to be part of the few who actually find it? Well, I mean, that's sort of I know it's a rhetorical question, but that's an easy one for me. I want to be part of the few. I want to understand. Just some other verses that sort of solidify this idea. This is from Matthew 22. This is the parable of the wedding feast. A father wants a wedding feast for his son, sends out the invitation, invites all sorts of people from the highways and the byways. The dragnet, just like the parable of the dragnet, puts the dragnet out there for everybody. Many are called, it says at the end of that parable, because a guy goes in there that doesn't have a wedding outfit on him. Many are called, few are chosen. The one without the outfit is taken out and thrown out where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. And the Master says this at the end of it. Many are called, like the dragnet. The net goes out and catches lots and lots of people. But just because you're called doesn't mean you're chosen, doesn't mean you're a pearl of great price, doesn't mean you're a clean fish. It's not everybody. There's wheats, there's tares, there's weeds, there's birds, there's all sorts of things out there. Again, similar verse, Matthew chapter 20, verse 16, talking about the people who are working in the field, telling us, thus, chapter 20, verse 16, "Thus at the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For many are called, and few are chosen." Talking about those that are working in the field, those that come in the beginning versus those that come at the end. Those that come at the end get the same blessing, the same riches, the same reward that was promised to those in the beginning. Even though those in the beginning seemingly have worked much, 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 much longer. It's been going on for a long time. Those at the end get the same inheritance, even though they did not understand the whole thing the whole time, but they came at the end. Even if it was just a few minutes before the whistle blew. And the Master again says the same phrase, "Many are called, but few are chosen. And we can look at other verses that say similar things, but by now you sort of get the idea. This is a very sobering gospel. This is again not the pie in the sky message that we are so used to hearing, and we ought to really understand the truth here. Okay, so with that said, let's look at some of the patterns about how the devil does what he does. How is he going to lie, and the deception and murder? What is the pattern? What is the thing, the method that the enemy is going to use to actually bring death to us, to bring deception to us, to bring destruction to us? Okay. For everything. And this isn't just in this particular message. Guys, this is everything across the board. This is really, I think, something we really have to sort of internalize and really use as a litmus test for us. If you cannot find a doctrine, a teaching, I don't just mean vaguely, I mean it's got to be there multiple times. If you can't find it in the Torah, in its infancy, and yet you believe it in the New Testament, but it's not in the Torah, don't believe it. Let go of it. Forget it. Go back. Research. Listen. Our litmus test, the pattern, the thing that we have is the law and the prophets. That's already Abba's will that has been given to us. Yes, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but all that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. The pattern's already there, and we need to understand or recognize these patterns. And Messiah is telling us these patterns are not good. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. This has been true throughout the kingdom of heaven. So here is the pattern for the instruction, Abba's instruction to us, the Torah, and our relationship to it. Here's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1. Again, if we find it in the Torah, then it makes sense in the New Testament. Then we can say, okay, now I read this, I understand what he's saying here because it's already been given to us in the Torah and the prophets. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1. Guys, this is eternal. This is forever for us. And now, O Israel, listen. Shema. This is still Shema, still part of the Shema. I know Deuteronomy 6:4, as everybody says, is the Shema, and it is, but this is part of the Shema too. Hear, O Israel. Listen, Israel, to the laws and the right rulings which I am teaching you to do, so that you live, meaning live eternally. Look at the PDP there, just for a little context, so that you live eternally, and shall go in and possess the land, meaning the kingdom, which Yah, your Elohim of your fathers, is giving to you. And here's the instruction, right? So here's what we are supposed to do. Do not add to the word. That is the things Abba has said. Just like the opening verses we read, what did the enemy do? What did the dragon do? What did the serpent do? He added to the word. He brought deception to the word. He brought death to the word. And he brought lies to the word. So what is Abba's instruction to us? Because we do not know the difference between good and evil. That was a lie. He told us the difference between good and evil in the Torah, in the instruction. And he tells us, again, right here, I'm just going to underline it in yellow so you guys can see it. Do not add to the word, which is exactly what the dragon has done in the days of Messiah, and is doing in our day as well. Do not add to the word which I command you. And here it is. Do not take away from it. Why? Because that's what the serpent does. So if we're listening to people that are telling us that are adding to Abba's word, telling us things that are not found in the Torah and the prophets, that are not doctrines and understandings that are given to us over and over and over again in the Torah and the prophets, if they're adding to it, or they're taking away and saying you don't have to do these things are not for us, they're not part of the understanding anymore. If you add or take away from it, you are doing or listening to the lies, the deception, and the murder. And do not take away from it so as to guard. The word guard there means to protect, to keep. We're supposed to protect these things, keep these things. Protect the commandments of Yah, your Elohim, which I am commanding you today. Well, that's the Shema. That's the whole. That is a forever instruction for us. Guard Abba's commandments. Messiah says no different. If you keep my commandments, guard my instruction, which is the instruction Abba has given. He's telling us the same thing. You will be my disciples. No different. It's no different. It's not a different message. It's the same message. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2. This is the whole story of the beasts that come up, and eventually the religious beast that comes out of Rome, or comes out of that beast from the sea. It says, to all of the beasts, that's all of the nations, and the dragon gave him his power. That's all of the nations, and his throne and great authority. And out of those beasts comes another beast from the earth. And I saw another beast, PDP version, because we've gone over this before, but if just for clarification, and I saw another beast, religious Rome, coming out of the earth, and it had two horns like a lamb. It looked biblically religious. It looks like the way. It looks like the people of the branch. It looks like believers in Messiah. It looks like a lamb, but it speaks. The things it says, it adds to and it takes away from Abba's word, like the dragon, like the serpent in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 all the way through verse 15. This is the end of the book that's telling us the serpent. Now, from the time this is written, it's talking about prophecy from their perspective, but for us, this is past. The serpent has been here. This religious entity has been here doing what? Adding to Abba's word and taking away from Abba's word. The very thing we were warned in the instruction in Deuteronomy, don't do. Don't add, don't take away from it. That's the voice of the serpent. That's part of the plan of the serpent. All right, so Revelation 22, now we're getting to the end of the book, right? So the whole book of Revelation goes by. What is the whole book of Revelation? It's the Torah and the prophets. It is the explanation of prophecies that start in Genesis 1 and go all the way through the book of Malachi. It's not new information. It's not different information. It's stuff that was already given to us in the Torah. So at the end of the book of Revelation, what's the instruction? What's the commandment? The same commandment that it has always been from the beginning. Whatever Abba says, we are to hear and we are to obey. It says in verse 18, for I witness to everyone hearing the words of the prophecy of this book, if anyone adds to them. Guys, that's Deuteronomy chapter 4. He's talking about Abba's word, the instruction. If anybody adds to them, like the serpent does, Elohim shall add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words, like the dragon does, of the book of this prophecy, Elohim shall take his part from the book of life and out of the set-apart city, which are written in this book, which is based on the Torah and the prophets. It's not different. It's not a different book. It's the same instruction that starts off in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all the way from Joshua to the book of Malachi. It's the same instruction. So he's telling us at the end of the book, the instruction is the same. Don't add to this, don't take away from it. So what is the dragon going to do? From our perspective, from the time of Messiah, from the time of the description of the 7 parables of Matthew 13 that are all warning us what the serpent's going to do. In a nutshell, what's the serpent going to do? He is going to add to the word, and he is going to take away from the word. Any voice that adds to the word or takes away from the word is the voice of the serpent. And now I'm not talking about, listen, people make mistakes. We're trying to understand. We're trying to learn. We mess up things. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people that absolutely are just adding, do not want to even consider that the instruction is the instruction. That's what we're talking about. That's the job, or really the job. That's what the serpent is going to do. That is what his deal is. That's what the plan of the dragon actually is, to add, to take away. And in doing so, he will lie, he will deceive, and he will bring death to those who follow him. Okay, so with all of that said, does that pattern that we read about in the seven parables, in verses like broad and wide is the way, many there go that way, that leads to destruction, narrow is the way, few that find it, many are called, few are chosen. Does that pattern, the pattern of the parables, does that pattern fit throughout the Torah? Because again, if we're going to look at something in the New Testament, if we cannot find its origin, its first mention, it's not just once, it's going to be mentioned over and over and over, because Abba repeats himself again and again and again, probably because we're thick-headed, hard-hearted, for us to get it in, but also so that we can confirm it. So you don't just, by off chance say, oh, well, here's a crazy doctrine that comes out of the Torah, and if I take this verse and I bend it and I twist it, and but there's no other thing that says this. No, it's got to be said multiple times. And you'll see it also spoken of within what we call the Berit Hadashah, the renewed, the fulfilled Testament. So here is, even though it's out of the book of Hebrews, which is i.e. New Testament, it's speaking to us about the Old Testament. It's speaking to us about the Torah, the storyline of the Torah. So let's look at the storyline, and you're going to see the storyline that the writer of Hebrews speaks about is the storyline of the many and the few, because the pattern starts way, way, way back then, because that's the kingdom of Elohim. It always has been this way. It is this way now. So here's the book of Hebrews, chapter 3 and verse 12. Now, I'm just picking it up at verse 12. You can read some of the verses before. You can read chapter 4, get some more information. But for time's sake, let's just read these couple of verses. Verse 12 says, "Look out. Look out, brothers." Now, I'm just put a little PDP version in there. Why is he saying, look out? Be careful. This is going to happen again. He's telling us to look out, like you're walking somewhere and you're walking down the street and there's a big hole. And so he says, hey, look out. Why? Because you're about to step in it. You're about to go down the hole. And he's telling us, look out, brothers. There is a pattern that is already established, that the Master tells us about in the mysteries of the kingdom. There's a pattern already established that you need to be careful of, because the pattern is happening again. The devices, the plan of the dragon is the same still today. So look out, brothers, lest there be in any of you a wicked, deceitful words of the serpent, adding or taking away from what Abba has said. Any of you a wicked heart of unbelief. Unbelief of what again? Again, PDP version, just to give us some clarity here. What is a heart of unbelief? A heart that does not believe that what Abba has said, Abba means, but instead adds to it or takes away from it. That's a heart of unbelief. So a heart of unbelief in falling away from the living Elohim, but instead encourage one another daily while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened by deceivableness. I'm going to use a different word there, deceitfulness. In other words, lest any of you are deceived. Deceived by what? Lies, murder, deception, not obeying the instruction, adding to it, taking away. Lest any of you are hardened by deceitfulness of sin. Verse 4, let me just underline, or verse 14, underline it so you guys can see, put it in yellow there. For we, you and I, have become partakers of Messiah, if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end. What he's saying is, if you believe all the things Messiah has said in the instruction that he's given us about the mysteries, about the Torah, about all of it, if you believe all the things that Moses said, if you hold on to that and you keep that and learn and add to that and grow in that and gain fruit in that all the way to the end, if we hold fast the beginning of our trust firm to the end, if we do not add, if we do not take away, while it is said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion. So here's the pattern he's going to show us. This is what he's telling us to look out for. When he says rebellion, what is he referring to? You're going to see in a second, he's referring to the Exodus. He's referring to the 40 years of wandering. The rebellion is the golden calf. The rebellion is the snakes from all the bickering and arguing and backbiting that they did that bite them. The rebellion is Korah. The rebellion is Baal Peor and lots of other things, scorpions and so forth and so on. All the things that happen to the people, to the many who come out of Egypt while they are walking after the Passover, while they're walking in the wilderness. Their hearts were in rebellion. Verse 16, for who, PDP version there, just so we make a connection, for who, meaning the many who were called out of Egypt. For who, having heard, they heard the word at Mount Sinai, they heard it, they heard the instruction, rebelled. Rebelled how? They added to it, they took away from it. They didn't believe it, they didn't trust it, they didn't obey it. Was it not all, or again, PDP version, was it not the many who came out of Egypt, led by Moses? Guys, that's the pattern. He's telling us the many came out of Egypt, the many came out of Passover, the many understood the Passover, the many heard the voice of Elohim, but we're going to find out the many fell in the wilderness. They saw death. Why? Because of lies, because of deception, and murder. Verse 17, and with whom he was grieved 40 years. He's talking about the 40 years of the wilderness. Was it not with, again, PDP version, was it not with the many, those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear that they, the many, and I'm just trying to connect the parables and everything together. When he says the many, he means the tares, the birds, the unclean fish, all the other pearls, all of that stuff. And to whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, his Sabbath, his seventh day? But to those who did not obey. That's the pattern. So what happens to the many? The many get purged. They fall by the wayside. They are scattered across the wilderness. We're going to find out in a second. The few make it to the end of the 40 years, a brand new generation, but only a few of those who came out make it into the land, into the rest. Verse 19, so we see that they were unable to enter in because of unbelief. So what does it mean to have unbelief? It means not to obey. If you do not obey, you do not have faith. That's what this is telling us. If you do not obey, if you add to, if you take away, if you reject what Abba has said, you do not have faith. It's impossible. You cannot have faith. You cannot say you have faith and do those things. They are just two polar opposites. They cannot exist at the same time. If you have faith, you will obey. And what happens because of that? They die in the wilderness, the many, and they do not see the rest that Abba has for them. Of course, you can read, on in chapter 4 there, and we'll get into some more information. But just that's enough for at least for us tonight. I want you to see what he's talking about is the pattern. This is the pattern that we're sharing. This is the pattern the master says. Many are called. The dragnet goes out. Lots and lots of come in, but only certain ones get picked. Lots of pearls, but only one little pearl. Lots of seed, but only certain of the seed. Most of it, the many fall by the wayside. It's the same pattern over and over and over again. Again, that starts where? In the Torah, in the instruction, in the law, and in the prophets. Okay, so here's, me, I like patterns, I like graphs. Here's a little graph to help us sort of wrap our minds around this, okay? So here up on top, I'm going to use purple, so this way I'm up here, guys. This is a graph, a timeline. This is a timeline from what we just read in Hebrews, which is, again, talking to us about the Torah. So it really is an Old Testament story, but it's a commentary written by whoever wrote the book of Hebrews about what's going on or what has already gone on in the Torah, and telling the people of that day, look out, be careful. This is going to happen again. If we're not careful, it'll happen to us. We could easily become the many rather than the few. So what does the story that the writer of Hebrews tells us, coming right out of Genesis and Exodus? The story of Passover. That's the beginning. Exodus 12, Exodus 13, the story of Passover. From Passover to Shavuot, to the giving of the Torah, to Abba speaking from the mountain, for Abba giving the instructions, giving the commandments, telling us the difference between good and evil, because it was a lie when the serpent said, you guys are just going to know good and evil all by yourselves. Even that's what people think today. No, this doesn't work that way. We need to be told what is good and what is evil. And then what is the pattern? The pattern then becomes, after they receive the instruction, just like it says in Hebrews, the rebellion started, from the golden calf to Korah to, again, the Baal Peor. All of that goes on. For 40 years, there is rebellion. For 40 years, they are bit by serpents and scorpions and snakes and vipers and wolves and you name it, whatever the analogy is. For 40 years, they add to and they take away from the instruction that they heard at Mount Sinai, as given by Abba's voice and then given by Moses' voice. And though the many are called out of Egypt, the many fall away. As Hebrews says, their bodies were strewn all over the wilderness. Then at the end of the 40 years, the few, Joshua and Caleb, the few of them that were called, and of course, a brand new generation comes. Not the first, the last. And what do? They circumcise themselves. And they are told through Joshua, or Abba through Joshua to them, do not turn to the right or to the left, which is just another way of saying do not add to and do not take away from Abba's word. And they're all like, yeah, absolutely, we're going to do that. They are the chosen. They're not just the called, they are the chosen. They're not the first, they are the last. And they enter the land, the rest. They go into Jericho, into the land promised to them. That's the pattern. That's the pattern the writer of Hebrews tells us is happening. That's the pattern the writer of Hebrews is warning us, be careful, look out. Why? Because it's going to happen again. And who did this all through this, even though I guess we do have him mentioned, because he's talked about as scorpions, he's talked about as snakes. That's the Nachash. Those are symbols of the enemy. So he was right there. He was there in Baal Peor. He was there in the worship of Baal. He was there in the with Balaam. He was there with all of those things. He was there. He was there. He was there lying. He was there deceiving, and he was there murdering. And so what's the pattern? Here's the pattern, guys, right underneath it. It's the same pattern. It starts with Passover and then goes to Shavuot. Not the giving of Abba's word, now the understanding of Abba's word, the gift of understanding of Abba's word, the gift of a heart for Abba's word given to his people, given to the whole house of Israel. And what begins happening very, very soon after this? Well, the first century, they've got it. They're learning. But even in the first century, they've got to deal with tares. They've got to deal with wheat. They've got to deal with, tares. They got to deal with weeds. They got to deal with birds. They got to deal with scorpions, even in the first century. And it winds up not for the next 40 years, but from our perspective now, for the last 40 Jubilees or close to 2,000 years, we've all been dealing with serpents and scorpions. We've all been dealing with voices that add to or take away from Abba's word. lots and lots and lots of people, the many, have had the fishnet put out, the dragnet put out. They're called. They understand little bits and pieces of what this message is about. And yet the many throughout the 40 Jubilees, I know this is a tough one to wrap our minds around, but the many, just as the pattern tells us, throughout the last 40 Jubilees, their bodies have been strewn across the planet because they added to and they took away. They listened to the serpents. I know it's a tough thing to hear. I know it's a hard, it really is a hard message to internalize. But that's the pattern. That's the pattern the writer of Hebrews is telling us. That's the pattern we see in the Torah. That's the pattern of what's happened with us. And again, we're talking about the whole religious history for the last 2,000 years. So where are we now? Almost 40 Jubilees later. What's coming? Where are we today? Well, here it is. The few, the chosen, not the first to hear the message, the last to hear the message. We're not circumcising ourselves just the way Joshua did before they went into the land. We're circumcising our hearts. To do what? To obey, to have faith, because faith equals obedience. Obedience equals faith. There is no faith without obedience. And we are learning not to turn to the right and not to turn to the left, even though for the last 2,000 years, all we've heard is turn to the right and turn to the left. Some of us are waking up and we're saying, nope, we don't add, we don't take away. And to those people, we're going to enter the land. We are going to enter the rest on the seventh day. And the first will be last, and the last will be first. That is the pattern laid out here in a pictorial way, in a graphic way, but hopefully in a way that you can understand. This same pattern is given to us multiple times in the scripture. Here at the bottom of this page is from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, starting at verse 33. Abba's speaking to Ezekiel, not Exodus, it's Ezekiel. Abba's speaking to Ezekiel, and he's telling him what the house of Israel has done, but also he's telling them in their rebellion what Abba is going to do for them. What is future? You're going to realize that everything we're reading here is future, but everything we're reading here is the pattern on the graphs above. Look at what it says in Ezekiel chapter 20 and verse 33. As I live, declares the Master Yah, do not I, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, that's Passover. That's Passover. With a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out, reign over you. And I shall bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the lands where you are scattered, with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out. And I shall bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, just like in this pattern. Up here, he brought them through the wilderness. He is going to bring us also through this wilderness. This is a future thing for Ezekiel. And I shall bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and shall enter into judgment with you face to face there, as I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Mitzrayim. So he's talking about the previous pattern. That's the pattern up here. Let me get rid of some of these lines here. Let me use yellow. This is pattern number one that Ezekiel's talking about, or what the Abba is talking about. He says, I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Mitzrayim, and I shall enter into judgment with you a second time. All over again it's going to happen, declares the Master Yah. And I shall make you, just like he did here when he entered into judgment with them. You can read under here, to enter into judgment is to pass under the rod. It's to purge. It's a process of purging away all that should not be there, all that doesn't deserve, that disobeyed, that has no faith, purging it, getting rid of it, because it's not going to be able to, as Hebrews says, enter into his rest. So he says here, I'm back there and here in the orange, and I shall make you pass under the rod. The idea of passing under a rod, I think you read this later, I don't know if it's Leviticus or Numbers, where you pass under the rod is when you bring your lambs in, when you bring your sheep, your herds in, and you take the rod And as they come in, you count them. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those 9 die. Those 9 go to slaughter. Those 9 are going to be food. The 10th one lives, a tithe. The many go to slaughter, are purged. The few make it. Called and few. Many and few, called and chosen. So, and I shall make you pass under the rod, and I shall bring you into the bond of the covenant. And here it is. This is the process that has been going on and is going on inside of us today. And purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. Guys, this is eye-opening. So what's the process that's going on right now in us, in this pattern here, in this 40 Jubilees that we are living through? What is actually going on? Abba has been purging the rebels, and they have been dying in droves, sprawled out across all of history for 2,000 years. The many. He's been purging the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against him, those who will not obey, do not do the instruction, add to it and take away from it. And I know it's a tough one to wrap our minds around. So you're telling me that, all of these people? No, I'm not telling you all of these people. I'm telling you a lot of these people, because that's the pattern. I'm not telling you. That's what the pattern's telling us, that it's the majority of people that will be strewn out throughout history. Now, does that mean that there's not a lot of people? Well, just relatively speaking, with all the people that have ever been on the planet, it's still a small number, but it's still a multitude by the time Messiah comes. And it goes, those who transgressed against him, who did not obey his instruction. From the land where they sojourn, I will bring them out, but they shall not come into the kingdom. Now it says they shall not come into the land of Israel. It means the kingdom. They shall not come into the kingdom. And you, those of us who are purged, those of us who do obey, those of us who do have faith, those of us who are entering the rest, we shall know that he is Yah. Same pattern given to us multiple times. Now I think it's like the third time we've seen it, from Hebrews to the parables, to most of the things Messiah says, right here to the book of Ezekiel. Same pattern. There is a purging going on amongst us. We see it in amongst our friends, our family, congregations. We see it. It's being purged. People that we see, they're there for a while, and boom, they're gone. They're just gone. They went off the deep end. They stopped obeying. They went south for whatever reason. All the different reasons the master gives for all the different seeds. They went south. They didn't bear fruit. They're gone. They're just not there anymore. That's part of the enemy's plan, to get us to not obey, to add to take away, forcing Abba to have his word come into fulfillment and action in us and do the things that needs to be done. So if this is the pattern that ancient Israel went through and the pattern that we are right now going through, are we to add or take away? No. Should we be obeying? Yes, to the best of our knowledge, to the best of our understanding. Of course, it's a different circumstance for us because we're so far at the end of the story. We're playing catch up now. We're trying to understand things that have literally been forgotten and to which the enemy has lied and deceived and murdered people over. So here is the lie. Again, the lie means to add to or to take away from Abba's word. Now, this is just one, but it's a big one. And we're heading towards the idea of the calendar and all that stuff. But this is big. This is Deuteronomy 5, the equivalent of Exodus chapter 20, the 10 words, the commandments. I'm just going to deal with one of them. Chapter 5, verse 12. Guard. If you read it in Exodus 20, it's remember. Right? All the other commandments don't say remember. This one says remember. Guard the Sabbath day. Now I put there in the PDP version S for days because I'm not adding to the word because it does say that in multiple other places. So I'm not adding to the word. Don't freak out. I'm not adding to the word. Guard the Sabbath day. Days, meaning also feasts. to set it apart, as Yah your Elohim commanded you. 6 days you labor, and shall do all your work. But on the 7th day is the Sabbath of Yah your Elohim. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor the stranger which is within your gates, so that your male servant and your female servant rest as you do. And you shall remember that you were a slave, I put the PDP version in there, a slave of sin, not just of Egypt, of sin, in the land of Egypt, and that Yah your Elohim brought you out from there by a strong hand and an outstretched arm, the Passover. Therefore, Yah your Elohim commanded you to perform the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day is a direct link to the Passover. Because of the Passover, we are to remember the Sabbath day. That's the pattern in Exodus. It's the pattern for us today. Messiah tells us he is the master of the Sabbath. Not that it's changed, because if you change it, if the day's being changed, if we're coming up with a different day, or if we're saying it does, you don't have to do it, what are we doing? We are adding to or taking away. Who does that? The serpent does that. That's the dragon's plan. And unfortunately, the pattern is Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 12. Listen to what happened. This is the pattern. And I also gave them my Sabbaths, meaning the Sabbath we just read about, but all the Moedim, to be a sign between them and me, to know that I am Yah who sets them apart. I'm down here, guys. But the house of Israel rebelled against me where? In the wilderness. Remember the charts we just looked at? They rebelled in the wilderness. Where did we rebel? Not in the 40 years of wilderness, in the 40 jubilees of wilderness. Why? Well, because there's a serpent, because there's a scorpion, there's the seed of the serpent, the seed of the scorpion, the beast, the false prophet. They've been telling us lies. They've been adding to and taking away, and we've been sucked into it, just like they were sucked into Baal Peor. They did not walk in my laws, and they rejected my right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they greatly profaned my Sabbaths. Then I said I would pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness and consume them. Well, if that's what did happen, and that's what happened to the ancient Israel, and that's what's happened over the last 40 Jubilees, the pattern remains the same. What have we lost? What has been stolen from us? What has been taken away? The Sabbaths, the feast days. For everybody, for the whole house of Israel, for all the world, for all of us. Ultimately, what we're talking about is the calendar, because that's where you find all of these things. Remember, this is the thing where he tells us to guard it. Guard this thing. So I don't think I have to, make a persuasive argument to most of the people that are listening to my voice at this point. You guys have a desire to keep the Sabbath, a desire to want to understand what the Sabbath is. The idea is we got to get past all of the lie, all of the deception, and the stuff that kills us to try to find out what the truth is, what the story is. And it's about the story, guys. It's always about the story. It's about the dragon's plan. It has been the pattern of Abba's people over and over and over again that if they're going to forget something, if they're going to add to something and they're going to take away from something, it always winds up to be the Sabbaths, the calendar. It always winds up to be the feast days. Listen, if you're the devil, if you are the dragon, if you've got a plan for attack against us, and you see in the commandment, the instruction, it says, eat of all of this, but don't eat of this. What are you gonna tempt the people with? Well, eat this. Well, if you see in the instruction, remember this, do this, don't forget this. What's the one thing you're gonna go after to make sure everybody forgets it? Nobody does it. The very thing. That's the fruit. That's the apple. That's the fig. That's the thing he wants us. That's the enemy's plan. That's the dragon's plan. And it works. It works. And it's worked a lot of times, many, many times before. And yet, even with that, Abba still kept his calendar. But we're going to find out by the time we talk about Messiah and the calendar, you're going to find out that they were on the right calendar. They had lots of other calendars going on at the same time. But we're going to see that they were on the right calendar as well. because Abba's word was true. He had to come and die on Nisan the 14th. It had to be the right Nisan. It couldn't be like a day after, a week after, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before. If we get to the point of thinking, well, it really doesn't matter what day we do it or when we do it, so long as we kind of do it. Well, no, then now you're adding. Now you're adding or you're subtracting. And that's not a road any of us should go down. And I know we've all been there. We've all done it. We've all did things we weren't supposed to do. But this is a progress towards perfection. It's a progress towards understanding. So has this happened before? Yeah, sure. Serpents had his plan going on for a long time. To the northern house that started to worship Baal, that moved away, that built their own temple, that was just full of paganism, the same thing happened to them. Here's Hosea chapter 2 speaking about the northern house and what happens to them in their rebellion against Abba. And now I shall uncover her shame, that is the shame of the northern house, before the eyes of her lovers, and no one shall deliver her from my hand. And I shall cause all her rejoicing, her festivals, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and even all her appointed times to cease. The northern house being scattered into Assyria, lost it all. We lost it all. The Gentiles, they got sucked into the Gentile nations. They lost it all. That's the pattern. When we rebel, that's the thing, that's the plan of the enemy to remove that from us. Here's the book of Lamentations, chapter 2 and verse 6. Now speaking about Judah, the southern kingdom, as Nebuchadnezzar is coming in to destroy the temple. It says he, meaning Abba, has demolished his booth, the temple, like a garden. He has destroyed his place of meeting, the temple. Yah has made the appointed times and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion. Well, they already forgot it. They already rebelled, and Abba's going to destroy the temple, and they're going to forget about it. They're going to remember it again by the time Nehemiah comes back. Through Daniel, they're going to come back. They're going to remember it again. They're going to rebuild it again. They're going to restore it again. But here's Zechariah is telling us, not Zechariah, here the other Jeremiah is telling us, we forgot it. We forgot it. We rebelled. And what happens when we rebel, when we listen to lies, when we listen to deception, when we change these things, what gets lost from us? The instruction. We don't obey. We don't have faith. We don't obey. This is one of the first things the enemy takes. Here's the book of Jubilees. Now, this is a warning to us. We're going to get more into this a little bit later. I just want to read it just so it gives you a little inkling as to what's going on, because he's talking about what could happen, what's going to happen if we stay on this road. This is written in between the time of the Maccabees, the time of Daniel, and the time of Malachi. That's when this book is written. So this is some of the stuff the people were going through in that day. It says, with regards to the calendar, with regards to obeying Abba's instruction, but if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandments, and they will disturb all their seasons, and all the years will be dislodged from this order. He's talking about the calendar. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to the order of the years. He's talking about this is after the Nehemiah. This is after the rebuilding of the temple, after the establishment of all this stuff again. He's warning them, we're going to forget it again. This is going to happen again. We're going to forget the new moons. We're going to forget all of that stuff. The next verse right here, in yellow there, he says, for I know and am from henceforth will declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising. He's saying, I'm not coming up with this for the book, the heavenly scroll, the heavenly scroll. The book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets, the heavenly scroll, the division of days is ordained. This stuff is already written in the heavenly tablets in the sky. It's there. It's in the Maseroth. Here it is, guys, just in green down here. And this is a warning that has come true. Unless they, the house of Israel, the believers in Abba, the followers of Messiah, unless they forget the feasts of the covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles after their error and after their ignorance. If Satan adds to, takes away from, lies, steals, deceives us concerning these things, then what do? Well, we do what the house of Israel has always done. We adopt what the Gentiles did. We don't do Passover correctly, or even think about it. We don't do Passover. We don't celebrate Shavuot. We don't celebrate the seventh day. We don't work the 6 days. We don't do any of that. We do All Saints Day. We do Winter Solstice. We do Saturnalia. We do Valentine's Day. We do Tammuz Day. We do Easter. We do the Feast of the Gentiles. That's exactly what the writer of Jubilees is telling us was going to happen, and it did happen. And he's not the only one. We've read it here in Hosea. We read it in Lamentations. And here it is, guys, also in the book of Daniel. Last scripture for today, Daniel chapter 7 and verse 43. He's talking about all four of the beasts. There's 4 different beasts that Nebuchadnezzar sees as a statue, that Daniel sees as beasts. The first is Babylon. Babylon is responsible for destroying the temple, capturing Israel, and taking them into captivity. That's Judah, because they forsook the Sabbaths, because they rebelled. It's everything that Lamentations was talking about. The beast after them is Medo-Persia, lets them go from Babylon to return to their place, but then also tries to wipe them out under Naaman. But Abba gives them reprieve. The temple is rebuilt. This is the time of Nehemiah. Things are being restored. It gets restored. The book of Jubilees gets written. Then the third beast comes along, Greece. And what does Greece do? Greece tries to change their calendar, and lots of Jews go after the Gentile calendar. And the priests are killed out. The Zadok priests are removed. The whole Maccabees story, the whole thing with the temple. They stop the worship for so many days. They stop the altar. That's what the third beast does. But the fourth beast, Rome, also messes with the calendar, but not like the third and the second and the first, because the Babylonians messed up their calendar, the Medo-Persians messed up their calendar, the Greeks messed up their calendar, but they, even in the midst of all of that, still kept Abba's calendar. We know that because when we read through the New Testament, I'm going to show you where they kept Abba's calendar correctly. Another message, another time. But here's Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. Listen to what Daniel says about the fourth beast, Rome. Pagan Rome. He's talking about pagan Rome and religious Rome. It says, this is what he said. The fourth beast, PDP, the pagan Rome. The Rome of Revelation 13. The dragon, who's empowered it, is the fourth reign on the earth, which is different from all other reigns, all other kingdoms. And it devours all the earth, tramples it down, and crushes it. And the 10 horns are 10 sovereigns, 10 emperors, through which the Jews were persecuted over 10 different emperors from the reign. They shall rise. They shall persecute Israel and the Netzarim. And another shall arise, another beast, another Rome, this time a Christian Rome, through Constantine, shall arise after them. And it is different from the first ones. This Rome usurps the people of the way, usurps the message of the way. This is what Revelation 13 that we read looks like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon, adds to and takes away from the word. And one of the first things that they did was to change the Sabbath. And it humbles. It creates an archway to the 3 of the 10 emperors that persecuted the Jews. An archway is made with Constantine over them. He humbles 3 kings, and it speaks words. And that arch is still there in Rome today. You can see it today. You can go online and check it out. 3 kings, and it speaks words against the Most High. It adds to Rome, Christian Rome, adds to and takes away from Abba's word. And it wears out the set-apart ones of the Most High, the Jews and the Netzarim. And it intends to change. Here it is. It intends to change, PDP version, Abba's calendar. The appointed time, the feasts, the Sabbaths, and the law, the Torah. Well, what did Christian Rome do? All of that. All of that. They did all of that. Every day that we have, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, are all pagan gods, named after pagan gods. Every month we've got, January, February, March, April, May, June, are all Roman gods. It changed the calendar. We'll get more into that next week, but this is just to whet your appetite for it. He intends to change Abba's calendar, the appointed times, the Sabbath, the feast days, the Torah, the Torah, the law. The law is now for us. You don't have to do it. It's not part of it anymore. And they, Israel, are given into Rome's hands for time, and half a time as the temple is destroyed. This is what the fourth beast would do. And the fifth beast, from Daniel's perspective, this is what it would do. And this is historically what it did do. What is the dragon's plan? Mess with the calendar. Mess with the calendar, add to, take away from Abba's word. And if we do not obey, we will there is a purging. There's a purging that has gone on for a long time. But we are the last. We're at the end of this thing, or close to it. And I think we are the people whose hearts are being circumcised, whose eyes are opening up, who are beginning to say, hey, wait a minute. I don't want to go to the right, and I don't want to go to the left. I want to enter into the land, and I'm going to circumcise my heart, and I'm going to obey. As for me and my house, we will serve Abba. Just like Joshua, just like the few, not the many, the few. All right, guys, we're going to stop right there. I know it's a lot of information. We're going to stop right there. But that is the dragon's plan, at least the first part of it. I only got so much time to tell it to you, but that's the first part of the dragon's plan. I hope that you guys enjoyed that you got that. Listen to it again, go over the notes. But I want you to understand the story. The storyline is important. It's been told to us again and again and again what's going to happen. We just got to figure it out on a timeline, put it into history and realize, oh my goodness, this has happened. We'll get into the calendar next week, a little bit of what Rome has done and the origins of that, and put this all together, look at the Sabbath throughout history and what's happened to it. And at some point, like I said, we're going to get together after a Saturday morning. We'll get together downstairs and we'll go through this, and we'll really just hash this out together, because it's going to take a longer time than I have to do on a Friday or even on a Saturday morning. But if you're interested, if this is stuff that's deep in your heart, if you want to have an understanding, as I do. Listen, we've all made mistakes, lots and lots of mistakes. We're just trying to get it right. We're trying to circumcise our hearts and follow him into the kingdom. I want to be there for the rest. Anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that. Again, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you would, if you enjoyed the message. Don't forget to download the notes if you haven't. And we'll see you on Friday night, 7:30 for our time of Hidden Manna. Brother Max and I got a neat conversation for you guys. And, of course, this upcoming Saturday as well, as we continue the parables of Matthew 13, talking about the kingdom. Until then, guys, have an awesome, awesome evening. We'll see you on Friday. We'll see you tomorrow morning for Morning Manna. Guys, in the meantime, shalom.